Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game in the Pandemic line of games called Pandemic Contagion. Now, Pandemic Contagion is not your typical Pandemic game, as it is not cooperative at all. As a matter of fact, each of the players in the game is playing one of the diseases trying to eradicate humankind. They're going to be trying to devastate cities by infecting them, and hopefully having the most infection in them before the city is eradicated in order to score points. This game will play 2 to 5 players. It's relatively quick and is a small card game. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside of the box. We'll see how the game plays, and we'll come back at the end and get my opinions on Pandemic Contagion. So here you can see Pandemic Contagion all set up for a 4-player game. Each player has their player board. You can see it here. It has these little cutout areas for the different levels of mutations that you have. And these mutations are incubation, which is basically cards you can draw. You have infection, which is going to be the number of cubes you place on a city when you infect it. And you have resistance, which is going to prevent you from losing cards or cubes or whatever it might be when bad events come around that might affect you negatively. You're also going to have a little petri dish, and this is kind of cool, that holds your cubes. And these are cubes you'll be using to infect cities, and then you're going to get a hand of cards. And your hand of cards is going to be what you use in order to infect these cities as well. Now, each player in reverse player order has placed a cube out onto a starting city, and that is going to be their starting of infecting that city. All of these cities here are real cities in the world, so you have Mexico City, New York, Essen, Tokyo, all in different colors dependent on what continent they're on. In addition, on these cards, you'll see some numbers. There's 10, 6, and 4 here, for example. The top number on these cards is going to be the number of cubes that need to be there before the city is eradicated. So 10 for Tokyo, or 6 for Cairo. The numbers on there are going to be points that are scored during various point scoring rounds, either death rounds or eradication scoring, depending on what type of scoring you're doing. We'll get into that momentarily. Players are dealt some cards. These cards are going to be basically colors which represent the continents. So you'll see purple is Africa, blue is Australia, South America's green, whatever. And you have these cards, and on your turn you're going to be taking 2 actions, starting with the start player. However, the first thing you'll do every round is you're going to reveal one of these cards from the top of this deck. This deck contains 2 types of cards. There are event cards and then World Health Organization cards, WHO cards. And so every 4th card will be one of these WHO cards. And when you have the last card gone, it triggers the end of the game. Alternatively, if there's only 2 cities left, the game will end. In this deck, at the beginning, you're going to flip a card. When you flip a card, you'll see that it has an event and a name. So we have jet stream triggers temperature changes. Play at the start of the turn. All right. At the start of everyone's turn, they must remove 1 disease cube from any city you are currently infecting. So right now, they have to remove a disease cube at the start of their turn. At the beginning of the game, they all have a disease cube, so if they decide to take this effect, they will have to do so. In addition, you'll see this little city logo on here. Anytime one of these city logos comes up, you're going to reveal a new city from the deck and place it out here. However, there are only 3 of these cards total in the game. So as I said, now that this is in effect, our start player, purple, would take their actions. If they wanted to, they could remove this cube, and the effect says they must. Alternatively, there is a protective resistance that they could go down 1 step to protect their cube and keep it on the board. You'll see we're crossing over the 1 line, so that protects 1 of their cubes. However, it's the beginning of the game, they probably won't do that, but note that that is what resistance is for, protecting your cubes from being removed from the board, or protecting your hand of cards. Now, once it's on their turn, they get 2 actions every time they take a turn, and those 2 actions can be one of 3 things. It could be drawing cards. Drawing cards, however many you draw, will be dependent on your current level of incubation. So right now, my incubation is 1. If I were to draw cards, I would draw 1 card and add it to my hand. So let's say I take that as my first action, and I get a new blue card. So now I have 2 blue cards in my hand. There are no blue cities, unfortunately, and I could take one of the other actions. It could be to draw cards again. I could draw another one. Alternatively, I could try and infect somewhere. Infecting is going to either allow me to infect where I'm currently at, which is nowhere because I had to remove my cube, or I can infect a new city by discarding 2 cards of the same color. Unfortunately, the only 2 cards I have of the same color are blue, and there are no blue cities. However, what I can do is I can always discard 2 cards of any color to be a wild card. So for example, if I wanted to infect Sao Paulo, I could discard a green card and 2 other cards in order to be a wild card, and I would infect Sao Paulo with 1 cube because my current infection level is 1. That player is now done, and we decide to move on to the red player. That person has finished their turn. The red player will now take their 2 actions. At the start of their turn, they do decide to protect their cube by going down 1, and they won't remove their cube from Essen. They will then look at their hand, and they can see, for example, that they could infect a new city. They could spend their 2 pink cards to infect either Tokyo or Seoul, if they would like. They are in an orange city and they don't have any orange cards, so maybe they decide to draw a card with their first action. Still no orange cards. Unfortunate. Let's say that they decide to spend 2 cards to make a wild orange, and they decide to infect Essen. They only need 1 card to infect a city that they're currently in, and 2 cards to make a wild orange. So this is 1 orange card, and they would infect Essen by placing a cube there. The third player decides to take the other action. So the other action you can take on your turn is to mutate one of your current tracks. In order to mutate, you need to spend the number of cards between the space you're on and the space you'd like to move to. So to go from 1 to 2, you would need to spend 2 cards, discarding them to the discard pile in order to increase your track. So for example, I could discard these 2 cards and increase any one of my tracks by 1 space. This would now mean that when I draw cards, I would draw 2. Or if I increased my infection, anytime infected somewhere, I would infect 2. Or if I increased my resistance, that I could protect from 2 cubes. Each player is going to play their 2 actions in a round, of course making sure to resolve the event at the start of their turn, either removing the cube or protecting their cubes in some way, until all 4 players have had a chance to go ahead and take their turn by taking 2 actions. Once they're done with that, they're going to start a new round, and at the start of a round they're going to flip up another card. Now you'll see that some of these cards have a little skull and crossbone at the bottom. If 2 of these skull and crossbones have been revealed, so once 2 are revealed, you're going to do what is called a death toll scoring. And you're going to look at each of the cards and see who has the most cubes on that card. That player is going to score this bottom number of points, so this number of points down here, and they'd mark those on the track. So this is kind of an intermittent scoring round. If there's a tie, let's say for example purple had 2 cubes on Essen as well, it would go to the player that's at the top, whoever placed those cubes there first. Additionally, you're eventually going to come to a point where you have a number of cubes on an area that is equal to this top value. So let's say that this is the situation in Essen. When this happens, an eradication scoring happens and this city is obliterated. Whoever played this last cube, let's say that it's yellow, will get to activate the action on the bottom of this card. Use 1 less card when performing a mutation, and they can play this when they want to. However, the scoring is going to be the top value here for the first place person, and in this case that's red because they have the most cubes and placed there first. Second place would go to purple, and third place would go to blue, scoring 6, 4, and 2 points respectively. And this would then be removed from the board, and we would have 1 less city in order to infect. As I said, if this ever gets down to 2, then the game will end at the end of that round, or we'll go through all of these cards, triggering all of the WHO cards, and at the end of that round, the game will end. These WHO cards are events that you will see throughout the game. For example, this one says, remove 4 disease cubes from any cities you are currently infecting. So it's a cure for disease, and basically you're going to have to pull a lot of cubes off of the board when this happens. And of course, you can protect from this again with your resistance if you happen to have it. Anyway, throughout the game you're going to score points through these intermittent death toll scorings from causing eradications to happen and being at the top value or first, second, or third on that city. And at the end of the game you're going to score points for a 1 final death toll scoring for every card, and you'll get points for each of your mutations, and whoever has the most points will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Pandemic Contagion from Z-Man Games. What to say about this? I have to say that I really don't enjoy this game. So I got the original Pandemic right out of the bat and played it a lot and really liked it at the time. And it was new and fresh and very, very interesting because it was one of the first really cooperative games to catch my attention. Now, I knew this game was nothing like that coming into it, and I kind of was excited to play the villain in the game, right? We're no longer cooperative, we're fighting each other, and we're trying to kill all humans, as Bender might say. So The problem is that I just don't feel any real tension from the game, right? I get 2 actions every round, and there's 3 possible actions. Draw cards, woo! Infect, which is just kind of really anticlimactic, right? I just add some cubes to the card. It might blow up, it might not, depending on how many cubes are already there, but that's perfectly plannable. And then mutating. I discard cards in order to do something. The theme doesn't really bleed through for me, which usually isn't a problem, but in this kind of game apparently is. That combined with some setup problems, in my opinion, make it even worse. So the event cards that you draw that either have the city or the skull on them or nothing, you discard 3 of them at the start of the game. You remove them from the deck randomly. And in this game, there are only 3 cards that have the cities printed on them, which means that if you discard randomly the 3 cards of the cities, which has happened to me twice, there will be no new cities drawn throughout the game. Now, this isn't necessarily problematic depending on how players fight over the cities, but it could be problematic in that if they're fighting over them very quickly, the game may just end very suddenly because it ends when you get down to 2 cities. And in a 2-player game, this is even worse because there's really not that many cities to start with. It's just meh. That's really all I have to say about it. I don't like it. I don't see a whole lot of place for it, but if you really like games where you're kind of back and forth with other players trying to vie for the lead in a city, but by the time it comes back around, the city could be gone anyway, then check it out. I mean, it's light, it's easy to learn, certainly, and it's fast to play, so those are its high points. It gives you the Pandemic universe with letting you play non-cooperatively. I guess that could be a high point, but overall, just not a game for me. If that sounds good, check it out. You may like it. Pandemic Contagion from Z-Man Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.